Welcome to episode 2 of the Game is to be Told podcast. My name is Troy Barter. The purpose of this podcast is to interview interesting people from all walks of life, all different kinds of professions, to learn what it is that's made them successful. What have they picked up along the way, on their path, on their journey, that's made them successful, that hopefully you can use to make yourself successful as well in whatever career you have. Most of this is catered to people that are in sales, but the reality is if you're in anything, in all walks of life, you're in sales. If you're talking, you're selling. If you find this episode to be interesting, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, share it with others that you think might like it as well, and hit that notification bell so the next time that we drop one of these, you're notified right away. This week's guest is a professional wrestler, Royce Isaacs. Royce Isaacs started in professional wrestling about a decade ago, started on the small independents and built his way up with the goal of eventually making it to his final destination of New Japan Pro Wrestling. That's where he always wanted to end up. That was his end goal, and he's made it there, and now he's starting to build his way up the card. In fact, just last weekend, he was in a pay-per-view contending for the Tag Team Championships. So we're going to interview Royce, and we're going to get an idea of what's made him successful. You'd be shocked at how much of the things that have made him successful in professional wrestling relate to how you can have success in a career in sales. Probably because Royce used to be in sales before he got into professional wrestling. So without any further ado, let's get right into that podcast with Royce Isaacs. Royce, appreciate you joining, man. And so for our podcast, most of the people that pay attention to it are on LinkedIn or they're on TikTok, and they're usually salespeople. So out of that fraction of salespeople, some of them probably watch wrestling growing up, and then another fraction probably still watches it or watches it with their kids. And I'm probably most of that fraction as someone who is still literally watching it all the time.
Yeah.
Which it does help to have an 11-year-old son who is, texting me when Raw pops on and SmackDown and everything like that. It's dope, man. But yeah, I mean, I think Royce, your claim to fame, just to kind of, or one of them, just to kind of give my audience a little bit of the background. You know, you're wrestling on the independents for quite a while. You were in NWA. You were NWA Tag Team Champion. To highlight it and give a little bit of an idea, I looked up some of the former champs, which is kind of crazy. So it's if you remember the Four Horsemen back in the day, if anyone does, pretty much all of them held the belt at one point in time. Steve Austin, the Dudley Boys, AJ Styles, kind of you name it, man. And you pop yourself onto the record books as well, engraved in there. Rock and Roll Express, right? And you guys actually wrestled at a pay-per-view, if I'm not mistaken, man. And now you're in New Japan,
Yeah,
dude,
we wrestled them mad tons. Yeah.
which is the dream, right? I think I'd seen in another interview you had mentioned that New Japan was really like your final destination or where you were looking to be, right?
Yeah, I've always like had a lot of respect for the Japanese culture, even just growing up before I even really got into wrestling as much or knowing that they had a scene over there. Um, and then once I started getting really into wrestling, like nerding out and learning all about it, I fell in love with Japanese wrestling. Um, and like the way it's presented over there and like the style of wrestling and everything just really clicked with me. And I think over WWE, New Japan has always kind of been my like dream goal to get there. So it's been really cool to work with them on their American brand and to get to go over there and do a little bit of stuff over there for New Japan proper.
That is awesome, man. So yeah, you mentioned, because like I think back, like I first got into wrestling, I think, and we're not too far apart in age. How old are you again, man?
I just turned 34.
Oh shit! So yeah, I'm 30. I'm 38. I'll be 39 in a couple of months. So I got you by almost a clean half decade. But I like when I first got into wrestling, man. Like literally, I have memories. God, I must have been 3 years old of like Mr. T at WrestleMania, like the promos building up to that
Mm.
on Saturday Night Main Event, like in the late '80s. So I didn't know a thing about Japan. In fact, my first even like learning about anything about Japan or seeing a Japanese wrestler was when we got cable, and Ultimo Dragon
Mm.
was on WCW. That was like when I
Oh
first
yeah.
got like any exposure to it. When did you first start to like get into wrestling? Like at what age, and how did you even find like the New Japan and the Japanese style of wrestling, and what kind of got you into it?
So I think I started watching maybe when I was like 7 or 8 or
Yeah.
so, and it was like the Attitude Era was probably like just barely starting. Like it was kind of starting to get to like,
Yeah.
oh, where this is really like mainstream and popular.
Yep.
And like I remember I had this neighbor across the street that like I was more of a WWF guy at the time, WWF rather than WCW. But my neighbor like too sweeted me or whatever, and I was like, this is really cool. Like it was like such a stupid moment, but it was like definitely like looking. I still remember that as an adult. Like it was like a one of those moments. I was like, oh hell yeah, like wrestling's cool.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's like the Rock and Steve Austin, all these like amazing stars were going, and it was like really hard not to be a fan. And then I kind of fell out with it for a little bit, and then I think it was like probably in college I started getting back into watching wrestling because one of my best friends was a big wrestling fan,
Yep.
and that's when I really dove deep and started to learn like what is independent wrestling. I didn't even know. I just assumed it was either WWF or like midget wrestling was like the only two wrestlings I really knew
Yeah.
about. And I started to learn about like Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and all these like top like Mid South and whatever other
Yeah.
hot indies at the
Yep.
time. And then from there it kind of branched off because I kept hearing people talking about, oh, Japanese wrestling's the best, Japanese wrestling's the best, Japanese wrestling's the best. So I started watching New Japan, and I was like, oh, like they're right. This is like
Yeah.
it's such a crazy mix of spectacle and sport over there, and it's so well respected. There's a reason why New Japan Pro Wrestling is called King of Sport because it really treats itself that way, and like that's how it's respected there.
It is fire, man. Like I like how serious they take it for sure. And it is I think one of the cool things about wrestling as somebody who like I've talked for a living in one form or another for 20 years is that it there is no real like language barrier. Like you can come in and it makes no difference what language you speak. And I think that is part of the reason like why New Japan maybe presents itself the way it does. I think the culture, obviously they take things super seriously. Like they do something, they seem to take it wildly serious, but also like usually the people that might be their number one guy or some of the top ones, they're not necessarily the ones that cut the best promos. Like growing up, my favorites were like The Rock was my favorite, like by a mile when I was
Hell
in
yeah.
high school. Because like to me, whoever talked the best shit was hands down going to be my favorite. That was the same way, like
Sure.
athletes, same way. Randy Moss, Terrell Davis, everybody. As growing up, man, like who I wouldn't say who would you like in your style to, but like who first kind of like was like your guy? Like who was your few that like were like these are the ones that like really kind of got you into it? For me as a little kid, it was Hogan for sure. My wife, same way.
Yeah, I mean, like Austin and The Rock obviously
Yep.
were like my top two, but that was every kid's top two at that
Yep.
time. And then I really liked Mankind and Kane just because they were all like dark and mysterious and had these masks and they were these massive monsters. Like
Yeah.
I think just as a kid, it like appealed to me like, oh, that's really fucking cool. Like these guys are like I don't know, just like otherworldly and whatever. Um, but like I don't know, I had I'm trying to think if there was like anyone that like wasn't like a top of the card guy that like I really like resonated with me. Huh. I mean, I always really enjoyed like I thought Mr. Perfect and Rick Rude were like really underutilized and really like just amazing at what they did. And like back in the day, I didn't quite get like all of like wrestling and what was going on, but I
Yeah.
knew there was something to like Goldust that made me like I was like, oh, I hate this guy every time he's on screen, but like it's like a weird like I respect like I didn't understand yet. Oh yeah, that's like part of the job and whatever is he's trying to get people to hate him and whatever. I was just like, man, I hate this guy, but he's like really good. Like there was this interesting respect there.
That's an interesting one, man, because there that is something I think
Yeah.
that is big on whether someone is really great, or one of the markers is like if you're handed what most people would probably consider a dog shit gimmick. Like, hey man, you're going to be a cross dresser and like come on to the guy wrestlers that you have a feud with. That on paper does not sound like people are going to remember you 20 years later. Like that sounds like you're a joke, like, and he turned it into something that, and there's countless examples of that, but that is something that, man, I think in general, whether it's wrestling or not, it's like in life, you're going to be handed a trash hand at some point, whether it's your boss in sales, it's like you get your territory changed. Like that's one of the big ones where it's like, hey, dude, I remember when I used to go door to door. Once they realized I was good, they wouldn't like, oh, well, now we're going to give them the good stuff. It was the opposite. You know, I went door to door. They'd be like, hey, so we're going to put you in the territory where the fraud just happened, where we just had to fire somebody. And then you have to figure it out. You have to go out there. Literally, these people were just defrauded. It was Verizon Fios door to door. Someone get fired for fraud because they did dummy contracts or they lied to them, and then they get their bill and it's twice as high as what they thought it was. And dude, it was so tough. And I think what it comes down to is you got to number one thing. It is what it is. I can't get out of this. I have to focus on what I can control and try to make the best out of the scenario. And the way that I did it, like to relate it to sales, where life hands you lemons and you got to figure out a way to still be that dude, was I would come in and I would lead with the shitty part of it. So I would come in and say, hey, the reason why I'm out here is that we've had a lot of complaints about fraud in the territory. Did you guys have anybody come out and review your bill or anything like that? And did you notice any issues? And, immediately they'd be like, yeah, absolutely. And be like, all right, cool. Give me a copy, pink copy, and give me a copy of your bill. And the sales process, the way it worked was if I got a copy of your bill, I'm halfway to the sale. Because now if I do anything to it, I can lower it. I can find a way to position a different package on something that I get paid a commission on, and we're good to go, dude. But that was incredibly tough. Like where you get handed a gimmick, which is interesting. I think like on the independents, right? And even like I wouldn't consider New Japan an independent. I think it's one of the big 3 or 4 that are out there on the planet. Definitely one of the ones that has one of the most storied history, but like I feel like you're less apt to be handed a gimmick. That's more of like a WWE thing. My son says that he's like, I don't watch AEW that much because they don't got the cool characters the same way. Like he wants to watch like the spectacle. Like his favorite's Bray Wyatt right now.
Sure.
By like 30 miles.
Hell yeah.
It's really John Cena. But
Yeah.
like John Cena, like so when John Cena went to SmackDown in Tampa, we were in the mix. We were at the guardrail. But for
Nice.
active, if you want to call him active, wrestles, maybe a few times a year, right? But Bray Wyatt is hands down his thing, man. Like so for when it comes to that on that side, like it's you are who you are, right? For the most part, or are you brought ideas, or is it more you're kind of bringing the ideas that you have to them?
It's sometimes a little bit of a mixture. I think that most indies are pretty freeform and you can kind of, this is what I do. Are you interested in having it on your show? There's definitely been times in my career where I've like for a couple of years, I only did it at one promotion, but this promotion in Northern California had me doing this. Like it was a lucha heavy promotion, so they didn't really book a lot of gringos, just like unmasked, unless literally like their main gringo faction is called La Migra, and they're like the Mexicans get out of here, like we got to get the migrants, whatever. It's like really like it's like so old school that you couldn't ever do it on TV now.
Yeah.
But in these little towns in Northern California, of course, it gets the most heat, and the fans all hate him, and they're throwing stuff in the ring and whatever. So they wanted me on their show because they're like, we really like your wrestling, but they didn't want to just have me be Royce Isaacs. So I did this. It was kind of cool. It was like a steampunk style. It was like a luchador mask, but steampunk style with like the Bane's shit. Yeah, Vapor. And so that was really fun. But I only did that at one place really, and like it was technically the owner kind of owned the gimmick, so I never really wanted to take it further, just because it was like a cool idea, and I think I could have done something real. I mean, who knows? My career might be bigger now if I was like, I'm gonna be Vapor all the time. But it would have been kind of a conflict because I wouldn't have owned the rights to it, and it would have been this whole situation. I've also had definitely situations where I've been given not necessarily like a full gimmick, but like you'll get like a piece of what you would be considered part of your character or part of your gimmick, or like a major storyline that, like, if this is like a movie or a series and you're going from the start of your career to the end of your career, this is going to like be a thing that you would at least certainly consider like a character trait or a fold or whatever. And like they haven't been the best, or it's been stuff where I've had to like, okay, well, how can I kind of flip this on its head and make it into a positive? And I've had some times where I've been able to turn like a really, really bad gimmick into something that like fans will still be like, hey, I remember when you were young in Colorado and you did this one thing and it was really funny and I really liked it. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, whew, I was able to make lemons out of lemonade. And then there's been times where it's like, okay, I give it my best, I try my best with it, and then it's kind of more like, okay, I'm like biding my time until there's uh, another opportunity maybe elsewhere. Like I can use this as a good, like I'm on a good platform now. They want me to do something that maybe I don't love, but I can do it and I can do it well. And anything that I'm maybe not as comfortable with, if they're like asking me to do something that I think is like ethically wrong or whatever, this, that, whatever, I can say no to that. And then I can, once I see a good opportunity elsewhere, boom, or whatever it is, if it's like betting on myself, I've done that in my career. I've left contracts before that weren't in my benefit or that I didn't like or whatever. So, uh, it, for the most part on the indies and for the most part you kind of are yourself, but it's not without its politics and it's not without its people that maybe they just really love this gimmick and they want someone to have it,
Yeah.
and you can't just like shit on their baby. You can't just be like, oh, that sounds stupid, because then they're going to be mad at, then they're really going to bury you. They're going to find a stupid gimmick to make you do or make you look bad. So or it's like sometimes it's just like, this is what they have for you, and okay, well, this is where they view me. I view myself in a different way, so I'm going to do my best with this for now because this is the best like platform that I have. This is, if it was in sales, this is the job that I have right now, but that doesn't mean you can't use, okay, now I have a year of experience at this company, I can still apply to this company, and that looks really good on my resume that I've done, at least a good job here or whatever.
This episode of the Game is to be Told podcast is brought to you by Salesorg.io. Are you looking to break into sales, or more specifically, break into tech sales? Do you have a degree? Do you not have a degree? It doesn't matter. We provide you with everything that you need to become a top performer in your first year in tech sales, and we don't charge those exorbitant enrollment fees that other boot camps or courses do. Some of them charge upwards of $10,000 or more. We give you the exact same training. In fact, a lot of times better training than what you'll get in those courses for $50. Not $50 a month, not $50 a week, $50 total. We're priced at that point because we want to make sure that we can help as many people as physically possible. And if you're a company and you're looking to get some sales training for your team, maybe a motivational meeting, or if you're looking to recruit, scale your team, both SDRs, AEs, managers, VPs, C-level executives, we provide it all. Head over to salesorg.io. Now let's get back to the podcast. It's similar to sales a bit because I know there's, I mean, you probably remember more examples than me where people, particularly in WWE, especially when Vince was really, really at the helm, where you'd get punished for getting a bad gimmick over. Like
Yes.
if you found a way to take something that wasn't supposed to get wildly over in the mid card or even below that, like that wouldn't result in like, all right, cool, you're moving merch, you actually got it over way more than we expected. Zack Ryder comes to mind, or Rusev definitely comes to mind as people that like they're handing a gimmick that might have been okay or something that was expected to be really low, and then you manage to get it over. And I
How
always
dare
say when
you?
it comes to sales, when people are trying to progress their career in general, like if you want to get moved, you want to move up, you want to get promoted to like a leadership role, I always say like you don't promote yourself. Your boss doesn't promote you either. The company doesn't promote you. The room does. So if you effectively get over with your peers because you're going to have to manage them, then chances are it's a foregone conclusion that when the role becomes available, as long as you've proven yourself, you can get over and you can get promoted. And that's often worked for me. But there's times when it doesn't. There's times where
Yeah.
the fix is in already. They already have their
Yes.
guy.
Yeah.
We already picked our baby
So
face.
I guess to go back to the question, I guess this is to give you a more. I wasn't sure when I was answering it how specific I wanted to get, but I do have something exactly in mind.
Yeah.
So as a guy that watched the Attitude Era growing up, you are familiar with Vince Russo,
Yeah, of course, dude. Dude, I
right?
know pretty much anything that you could say. I'm probably gonna have. I know Russo well. I know he destroyed probably more than he built, but he was the man for a bit.
He was, yeah, absolutely. Like I have to respect what he did
Facts.
at WWE for the Attitude Era and everything like that. So uh, that said, I worked with him at a promotion in Colorado.
Yeah, I remember that.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah, and so like going into it, I was very excited. It was like, oh, this is this like legendary guy. He's done some really cool stuff. Like I was very interested to like learn. Okay, what can he teach me about character, promo, all this stuff that I need. Especially like at that time, I was still figuring out who the hell Royce Isaacs was.
Yep.
Um, they were having a few tapings for this promotion. The first few that I I had to miss that. They were supposed to be like these big deal tapings, but I had a WWE tryout during the first one, and then my first tour of Japan, which was with DDT Pro in like 2000. So this is like, I guess, the end of 2016. No, sorry, end of 2017. Excuse
Yep.
me. So it's like just like a complete. I don't mean to, but these are clearly bigger opportunities. So I have to do this over just like a regional show. And I think that's where I soured with him was he was like, "Oh, this isn't your first priority, so screw you." And it became this thing where my gimmick was that I would say things that like would sound gay, just to be like, this is like a thing that you wouldn't like if we were being less PC. These are the times where you'd say like pause or whatever after,
Yep.
kind of like just stuff like that, where I would say something like that.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, like I don't really like, this is Vince Russo. I guess I should just go along with it.
Yep.
And I started to kind of make it a bit where I'd say something and then I would break fourth wall and I'd go, "Hey Kelly," which was our camera guy, "Hey, edit that in post." And then it became like a running thing where I'd be like, "Hey, like Kelly, I watched the show. You haven't edited anything." Like we'd have like these back and forths, and people started to really, really like it. But I also, as young as I was in the biz, I still knew I was kind of tiptoeing in this area that I didn't really want to like. People aren't going to come after Vince Russo for this. They're going to say like, "Royce, you're doing something inappropriate. You shouldn't be like talking like that. This isn't okay. This is a family show." And like, it's kind of like, like you're almost like implying some kind of weird, like homophobic kind of thing
Yeah.
by like saying these. And I'm like, so it started to creep into that weird area. And then finally, I remember there was a show. So I'm trying to do my best with it. It's getting over the fans. People are liking it. And then he wanted me to do some live promo in front of the fans that was just going to be, it was going to bury me. No one was going to look good, even my opponent. Like, it was just going to bury myself.
Yep.
And I was like, this is going to make me look homophobic no matter how much I try to play it off, this, that, whatever. And so I went up to him and I go, "Vince, I'm not doing the promo tonight. You can take it for whatever it is. Like, this will not happen." He tried to throw another writer. He's like, "Oh no, I'm sorry. If you had a problem with that, just take that time, do 2 more minutes for your match, whatever. It's not a problem. Like, Jeff wrote that. I didn't write that." And I was like, "Okay, but it's not happening. Okay, cool." And then like later in the night, it was a taping once again. So like I had to wrestle like a bunch of times that night. And he's like, "Okay, well, you're gonna go out there and do it this time." I go, "No, absolutely not, Vince. Like, no, I'm done." But this is also a smaller regional show. If you're on WWE, if you're on Impact, if you're on like, it's harder to do this. It's harder to like have the balls to stand up for yourself and say, "I'm not putting my own neck on the line. I'm not getting myself canceled
Yep.
on some dumb shit just because you have an agenda against me, and now you're even more angry that I'm getting it over and I'm doing my best with it." So like, I don't know. I think that was probably one of the moments where it was like, okay, like I really had to uh, be a grown up and be like, "No, I know this is wrong," and I don't know, like respect to Vince Russo for what he did in his prime, but like honestly, like fuck him for trying to bury me, and I don't really, like it's a person that I haven't talked to him in years, and I have no interest in talking to him.
Yeah. Obviously, I've never had a chat with Vince Russo, but like for people that like aren't huge, like deep in wrestling, like Vince Russo had a giant. He was definitely one of the main people behind probably one of the biggest eras in WWE history. Like he was, I think, head writer during the Attitude Era. So like Stone Cold, The Rock, when
Yep.
they were coming up, he was the dude. When it was like really a soap opera for dudes, like he was the one that was writing a lot of those storylines
Yeah.
and everything. And then went over to
Yeah.
WCW. And I think that's where things kind of started to fall apart. He put the belt on himself, if I'm not mistaken. He was the champ at one point.
Yeah.
I believe Roddy Piper absolutely demolished him and buried the hell out of him on TNA or Impact back in the day. Like
Yeah.
he has had a tough time since that Attitude Era where things were literally the opposite of PC. You could do anything and it was encouraged, and he did.
Yeah.
He did exactly that. It's funny, man, how like things that people look at that era, and I do too, because I grew up watching it with rose-colored glasses for sure. If you try to do
Of course.
2/3 or maybe most of what was was popping back then today, your doors get closed the next day You're probably canceled before the three
Yeah.
hours of Raw are up. Or two back then, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, man, that is an interesting story though, dude. Like for sure. Like I think it's funny, like, it's odd how it relates to, like sales gigs and everything like that. Like you're going to have times where you're at a place, you're doing all of the right things, and your goal and your North Star doesn't mesh with what the company's goal and North Star is for you. And it feels like no matter what you're doing, no matter how well you're doing it or how right you're doing it, it's just not going to play there. And you might have to take a step back. You may have to leave. You may have to step down into a different role and get somewhere where you're put into a position where you might have to work harder, you might have to do more, you might even have to do it for less pay. But it'll put you in a position later where if you're more left to your own devices, the way I would relate it to wrestling is if you see these people, like Drew McIntyre in WWE, like he's in three-man band, he's in these gimmicks and he leaves and now he has more control and dude gets absolutely massive. His look completely changes, barely looks like the same person. My son, he's pumped for the Elimination Chamber on Saturday, so we watched some old ones, and Drew was in one of the old ones, and I was like, dude, that's Drew McIntyre, who we had just seen walk right up to him at the guardrail at SmackDown. And he like couldn't believe me, like he had to step
Yeah.
down. And there's some people say you can make good money or more money on the independents, but it's tough, dude. Like I can imagine like it's scary as shit when you have to do that. And you have more control though, like you were saying, to either reinvent yourself or get something over that maybe a larger company or organization isn't going to let you do. And I think the beauty of that is that if you do that and you do get it over, you get to bring that with you usually to, unless unfortunately like for you where the company owns the gimmick, where you can bring that over somewhere else, and then you're able to kind of profit or benefit off of the risk that you took and the fact that you were like, I'm going to bet on me, and the bet
Yeah.
paid off. I couldn't tell you how many times in sales that's happened. It happened to me, man. I was working for a company called Fleetmatics. Verizon bought it for $2.4 billion. And I was a director, and then like I was managing probably 30 people. It's a good organization. We were crushing it. We had equity. And then with Verizon, it was like, we don't have managers that manage 30 people teams or organizations unless you're like a VP. So like slowly but surely the team whittled down to like, I'm managing 5 people, 4 people, and then it's almost at the point where like I'm the closer for people setting the deals up basically. And I had to go and be like, you know what? I'm going to take a risk and go to this other company. Enough of my stock is vested. I'm going to dip. And it does not have the security that Verizon does, obviously. Definitely didn't have, a lot of the other benefits, but that company is a company called PandaDoc. It's like a digital signature type thing like DocuSign. And I was able to get over there as a director and manage a team. And I was able to kind of take what I had learned elsewhere, and they were more likely to hand me the ball on more things than Verizon ever would, because it's Verizon. It's like WWE. Basically, it's the big time, and it
Yeah.
enabled me to boost myself where I never probably could have elsewhere. And if I had parted on probably better terms with Verizon, I probably could have came back over in a larger role. But I didn't want to. But it is odd how there's real parallels there, man. Where
Yeah.
because salespeople a lot of the time are independent contractors, or they're used to that life and they're grinding it out. Very similar to wrestling a bit. You're kind of running your own business a bit, but you're partnered with someone. Like you are now over in New Japan, man. So you went over there, right? You were in the G1, like their big tournament.
Yeah, I was on the G1 tour.
Yep.
I was there with Filthy Tom, helping him on. We did a bunch of
Yep.
tag matches over there. I was over there for like 6 weeks or something like that. It was a really long. It was honestly like I wish I was still over there. Japan was especially being over there for like New Japan, where it's like the big time, and you're getting to go all over and see all these places and all these life experiences, and then wrestling in front of thousands of people every night. And at the time, they still weren't allowing like cheering, but like the fans would just clap
Yeah.
along with us and make as much noise as possible. And then
Mhm.
when you would do something like really good, and you'd get like an accidental, because in
Yeah.
Japanese society they're so like strict on rules, they would really
Mhm.
try to like actually like we're not going to make noise because we're not allowed to. So if you did something really cool and you got to you're like, okay, fuck yeah, that was sick. Like I got
Yeah.
them, got them to break rules. Yeah,
That
man, it
is
was
fire.
amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. You mentioned something, man, that hit. It's not even in my notes, but I think it's a good one. You mentioned Tom. You mentioned Filthy Tom Lawler, because you're in Team Filthy, right? In New Japan. How important would you say are the relationships that you build, in the locker room, off camera, with the boys, in terms of your ability to learn and progress your career in the business?
I think I think it's honestly one of the most important parts of wrestling because like if you're going to be part of a big wrestling company, your match is going to be 10 minutes, maybe 20 or 30 if you're like really getting main event time and like
Yeah.
it's a big match, but it's usually you're going to get, you're going to have a match for about 10 minutes and everything in between when you're getting on the bus, you're going to the next town or whatever, getting on your flight, you're going to the next town, it's a day off in between bookings and you're exploring around like it's a people business. You have to have people skills and you have to have friendships because like I'm on the independent. So if I want to get booked somewhere, it's much easier if I know someone that already works there. Hey, Trey, can you put in a good word with so and so? Is going to go a lot farther than no matter. It doesn't matter that I've been to Japan. I've worked for all these. Like I've worked for almost all the major companies. Just cold calling someone still is really tough. Like I will get left on red or left on unread all day still, and I would say if you look at my career, a pretty awesome resume as far as wrestling goes. So it is
Yeah.
definitely very much so a people business, and you have to have friends all over. And so if people think that you're a jerk or you're hard to work with or you're hard to deal with, even if you're talented, I've seen people that are mega talented, like they could fit all my talent in their pinky, but they can't cut it in wrestling because they're an asshole. They're hard to work with. They are a diva every night.
Yeah.
There can be so many little interpersonal things that can just cool people off. I mean, if you look at WWF, there's so many people that Vince has had one little thing that he's like been like, nah, not about it, and it's like all of a
Yep.
sudden their career. And it's like some of these people are incredibly talented, or they'll go on to another industry and completely crush it there. And it's like, well, in wrestling, you got you got to have people that like you, and you got to be able to deal with people.
Dude, when it comes to like top performers that are hard to work with, I say it all the time, man, especially when people want to move up. Like if you want to get promoted, I'm sure that it's probably relatable when you want to move up the card. I mean, shit, I can actually relate to that too, because when I was a battle rapper, I wanted to move up the damn card. You start off with a tryout, and then you may get into you may get I main evented in Montreal. And so it wasn't the big time. The big time for King of the Dot is Toronto. Montreal's a smaller
Hmm.
thing. Lopesci was running it. But we got to co-main event it, and we co-main evented it with some hitters, dude. It was a 2-on-2. Fresco and Real Deal were battling in like a tournament. And me and Sire, who you probably remember from rapmusic.com back when we posted on the same message board, did a 2-on-2. But the way I always say it is, if you want to move up, being a top performer is one thing. You have to be high value and low maintenance. It's the way that I always say it. So you want to be very high value in terms of the numbers that you're putting up from a sales perspective, or if you're a battle rapper, or if you're a wrestler, you're putting on good matches, both ways, but you also have to be low maintenance. In other words, you can't be a pain in the ass. If you've got a problem, don't bring the problem as a complaint. Bring some potential solutions and put it through the lens of positivity, not you griping about it all the time. And when you don't, and I could name names that I won't, but there's so many examples in my sales career of people that were really high value and were incredibly high maintenance, like ridiculously high maintenance. It came with the value. They thought they could do it. And the thing is that in sales, no matter how good you are, and I think it's probably in everything, wrestling, rap, whatever, you'll have a low point. You're not gonna be hitting every single day forever. Even when you are consistent, you're gonna hit a rough patch no matter what. And if you're that guy or gal that's wildly high value, but you're also wildly high maintenance, the day that value slips is the day they start thinking about replacing you. And it makes it so difficult to be able to really carve out a long-term career, and it makes it even harder for you to carve out a career where you're growing with it and you're progressing. The way that I related in sales, and I'm sure you can tell me if I'm wildly off base, but in sales, I think like I'll look at someone that's an SDR and they're super high maintenance, they're a pain in the ass, they're negative, they bring down the room, they don't bring up the room, they're not interested in helping people. And I think to myself, so you want to become a closer, you want to close deals, you're already a pain. I'm going to put a bigger spotlight on you, and now you're going to become an even larger issue than you were before. The higher up that I move you in the organization, the bigger problem you become, regardless of what your value is. If you have all of those personal issues, or if you're not a good culture fit, and I'd have to assume that promoters look at it the same way. I'm going to move you up the card. I'm going to put a bigger spotlight on you. Then chances are the big pain in the ass personality that you have is probably going to grow too, or it's probably going to become a larger problem because now you're up against people that aren't going to put up with that shit because they're
Yeah.
not at the bottom of the card. They've been around the block for a bit. You tell me, man, does this resonate with things that you've probably seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like if you're going to be, let's say you're on like the regional level and you're trying to get to a national level, and now they're flying
Yep.
someone in to that's a big name to wrestle you, and it's like, well, if you're going to be an asshole to him or you're going to be hard for him to work with, we'll give the opportunity to someone that maybe isn't quite as talented, but we know is going to appreciate it and is going to like actually probably outwork you in the long run and like be easier to deal with, and I'm not going to have to worry about all like, okay, is he going to completely piss off the top tier talent that we're trying to bring in for his benefit?
Yep. So, Royce, you mentioned relationships, like, and the fact that does, it has helped your career. Are you a natural relationship builder, people person, networker, or is that something that it kind of clicked that you were going to have to be and develop that skill over time if you wanted to sustain your career and grow it?
So like I don't know if I'm necessarily a natural relationship grower um or that even I'm like necessarily like talented or good at it, but I
Yep.
I did know that it was important, and I knew it was important from a fairly young age. And then I want to say, so I was like right out of college, before I was even a wrestler, I was working as a personal trainer, which like everyone thinks, okay, yeah, you're like training people all the time. But honestly, it's a sales job. You just have to be like a buff guy that also knows how to work out while you do it. Because
Yep.
if you can't sell any personal training, you will have zero clients, or you'll have one or two that were given to you and then they won't renew with you or whatever. So really, it is a sales job. And then as I was getting better at sales and I was excelling, like I think I won like personal trainer of the month, aka top salesman of the month. Like it was just based on sales, like 3 times in
Yep.
Colorado. I was like top 10 for the year in all of my company or whatever. But I got interviewed for a manager position, a fitness manager position, and or I had an interview coming up, and I knew that I'd had some interpersonal, I guess, not like huge issues, but like it was more like these are misunderstandings that are like
Yep.
maybe going to hold me back, especially if I'm managing people. And I actually read How to Win Friends and Influence People, the old Carnegie book.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that really taught me like how to like see from other people's perspective, how to like communicate effectively. Like, cause I don't think I've ever really been like an asshole per se. I mean, I have my moments, we all do, but like, figuring out how to best like phrase my own, like how to communicate with people and, I guess present what I'm trying to say in a way that's like digestible and, shows the benefit for both parties and whatnot. Like it really helped me. And that's one of the reasons when I interviewed to be a manager, I was directly asked the question by the regional at the time. He was like, I've heard you've had some issues with so and so and so and so. how do you plan on combating that? I was like, well, look, I've been doing work on that. I understand that this has been a problem. This is what I've done. This is how I move forward. And he like pulled me aside months later and was like, I was very impressed that you actually cared enough to improve yourself. Like, it wasn't just like, well, but I'm a nice person. It's like, yeah, I know I'm a nice person, but if other people are perceiving me the wrong way, that's going to hold me back regardless of what my intentions or whatever are. So it is very important. I learned that at that point, and it was like just something that's always stuck with me, no matter what I've been doing, no matter if it was I was there for a while. I worked in retirement home sales for a couple years. I worked as a personal banker for a couple years, and then like from there, I basically transitioned into wrestling full time. I was wrestling a little bit while I was still in retirement home sales, but that was kind of towards the tail end of that. And then in wrestling, it's like it's the same thing. It's all about interpersonal relationships and making sure that you're communicating well and all that kind of stuff. So it's stuck with me this whole time.
I was gonna say, man, I think like I rely on my experience battle rapping in front of hundreds of people a lot when it comes to the stuff that I do in sales, particularly as a manager when I have to get in front of the room. And I heard you and Tom. I watched a promo at I think it was at the G1, if I'm not mistaken. I was like, damn, Royce pretty good promo. Like, like, because to me, like a promo is sales, and if you're talking, you're selling. You're conveying an idea, an emotion, something that you want to be. You want to upload it into somebody else, and you want what's in you to be, conveyed through them. You want them to feel the same thing that you're feeling. It's a transference of certainty, transference of emotion. It's a transference of everything. How would you say like that? You have pretty solid sales experience in terms of like diverse roles and everything like that, different industries. Did that directly help you when it comes to like, all right, cool, now you're in wrestling, you got to cut a promo now, and it might be in front of a few people backstage, but it also might be in the middle of the ring, like you were saying, and it might not even be saying some stuff that you want to say a lot of the time. Like, how did that experience talking to people and working on that help you when it came to, all right, lights, camera, action?
I mean, promos are always tough. I think no matter what. I mean, I guess for some people they just come naturally. Like you look at
Yeah,
a LA Knight, and you could just hand him a microphone and be like, "Hey man, could
yeah,
you like kill an hour?" And he would make it entertaining, and he would kill an hour no problem.
yep,
Um, for me, I think definitely they came a little bit less naturally, but I absolutely I always kind of had to keep that, I guess, sales psychology in mind of, okay, I know I want to get to like the end of the promo. I want to be this. This is what I'm trying to convey. But how do I get the audience that maybe, like
yep,
they haven't just wrestled a match, their neck isn't hurting, they don't have to go against a 7 foot behemoth next month. How do I word this? How do I emotionally convey this? How can I get them to feel what I'm feeling and what I want them to feel? Absolutely, sales has helped a lot with that. Um, I think, especially with the G1s and Tom, just being there with him helped me so much because he's such a like a natural at being able to like take his own personal experiences and emotions and lay it out there. And I think that helped me feel a little comfortable being like he can be so vulnerable for such a Tom Lawler is one of the biggest badasses in the world. Like he's just like it's on
yep,
document. Like everyone knows this, but
yep.
he has no problem being like super vulnerable. So I think I take some of like my sales past and my psychology there, but then I also mix it with this very human like, wow, I can be a badass and I can still show that vulnerability, and I can really bare my heart, my sleeve, because I think I naturally in real life kind of shift that way. But also sometimes it's when you're wrestling, it's hard just to be like, oh yeah, that's okay to do, or I'm supposed to be a badass, like or whatever. It's like no,
Yep.
that's showing yourself is definitely part of this.
So I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. You're doing a better job of steering this towards sales than I think I would. Would you say that proximity to Tom has helped up your game? Like, in other words, that association, you running with him right now, has helped rub off and helped up your game? Because like I said, man, I saw that promo. I was like, damn. The thing that I liked about it was like, I obviously, with my background, I was like, damn, these guys can curse, they can keep it real. This is like some,
Yeah,
like you get a different level of like rawness to it. But would you say that, like, I think of some examples, that I'll bring up in a second. But like, would you say that you running with him has helped?
absolutely. Yeah, I Tom is like both in ring promos, all that kind of stuff. Like Tom is so good, and even just being there as like part of his match, like just seeing like even in the G1 when he would be doing tournament matches, and I'm just there for like moral support ringside, cheering him on, getting the crowd up, all that stuff. Just watching and learning was like an invaluable experience. I think that's something in general that I've tried to do throughout my career is like it's very like cliche, but like the iron sharpens iron. I always wanted to practice with the best. Like even when I was just a regional guy in Colorado, when I first started out, it was like I wanted to practice with the guys that were really good and push ourselves. And then when I moved to LA to take wrestling more seriously, it was like as soon as I met Jungle Boy before he was like ever like a bit. We were just on the show where I did the Vapor gimmick. He was on those shows too, so we had happened to meet and struck it up, and it was like this kid is so freaking talented, and he could do a style that I was definitely at that time working a slower, more old school style, and I knew he had this kind of faster indie PWG style, and I was like, if I can use that and like take some of his stuff. Obviously, I'm not going to be going out there doing, legs like head scissors and all this stuff all the time. Like that's not necessarily the jam. But one, it's important to learn how to do that kind of stuff, so that way I have the body control and the ability to, especially if I'm like coaching people down the line, which is something that I do and enjoy. But also, it's going to only up my game when I have someone doing these moves to me that I know how the physics of everything works and all that. And I was able to really up my game in terms of my work rate, my speed, all of my incorporating that stuff only really helped me. And then since then, I've always like gravitated towards people that were either at my level or higher and seen what I can kind of glean from them. And Tom being a major part of that.
Dude, I think it relates so well to sales. Like the example that I can think of that's like the most glaring one in wrestling right now, and you probably have a better one, but this one's probably pretty good, is Dominic Mysterio. Like
Mm,
guy who he was with his dad, right? Rey Mysterio. Probably everyone knows Rey. He's been around for forever, 30 years, right? But he was looked at as like you're just there because you're your dad. Could not cut a promo. Doesn't necessarily have the most leaps off the screen look as a pro wrestler. Could do the moves, much taller than his dad for sure, but like was not looked at as his own man. He's Ray's son. They put him in, with Rhea Ripley and I was Punishment Martinez back in the day, and
yeah,
Finn Balor. That faction that he's with now, it has wildly leveled him up, and you can see it even on the screen that like those three look at him like, all right, we're going to take him under the wing and we're going to level this dude up and we're going to get him over. And man, did it work. Like he is looked at as, it's funny because he's hated, but he's hated in a different way now. He's hated in a way that you want to be hated if you're the heel. He
yeah,
starts talking and everybody's hating him, but that's how it's supposed to be. And so many moments where it's like you're the chicken shit heel. And when Beth Phoenix is slamming him in the ring and he's screaming out and everything like that, and it's like no one would have any level of investment in him, a year ago. And it is so somebody thought we need to pair him with this group to help him learn some things that he's not going to learn. Just being paired with his dad, he needs to diversify his experience and he needs to get around some other folks for iron to sharpen iron as well and get him over. And if you have a fantastic manager or booker, that might happen where they're like, well, you know what, you're lacking here, we're going to put you with this person and you can level yourself up. Now in sales, to relate it to that, I always say it's a so, and this is not a word. I thought back to all the my terms of phrase that I would use as a manager, and like half of them weren't really words, like association versus disassociation. I don't think disassociation is a word, but what I mean by that is you want to associate with the people that can level you up, and the ones that are being negative, and the ones that are not going to help you, but maybe you gravitate towards as like this is my buddy. You really want to try to move away from as best you can, at least during work hours. The difference is that you're probably not going to have a manager that's going to pair you with themselves. You've got to go out there and do that shit on your own. So I say it's like you find the top 3 or 4 that have the most success and be like, and if you're in person and it's not a remote job, buy them lunch. Be like, man, or you know, if it's a woman, either way, say like, I really admire what you're doing here. I'd love to buy you lunch. I'd love to pick your brain, and don't just ask them professional questions. Try to get to know them. Try to make friends with them. Try to get to know them on a personal level, because if you can, and you can get them to invest in you, number one, it makes work a lot more fun if you're working with your friends. It also makes it a lot more fun when you start making some actual money. And it is, I think that's a huge thing that I was so bad at probably for my first half of my sales career, is I didn't network, and I associated with, you know, the fellas, whoever I thought was going to be cool to, you know, crack a beer with when work was over. And I changed that over time, and I realized I think I did brought me to some pyramid scheme thing, and they brought up like you are who you associate with, you know, birds of a feather
Hmm.
and all that. And I was like, man, I need to change this up. And when I got over to the bigs, when I got to Fleetmatics, which was tech sales, where you could legitimately make a 6-figure income, I was like, all right, enough of that BS. I'm not just hanging out with somebody because I think they're cool to hang out with. I'm hanging out with people because, yeah, they might be cool to hang out with, but really it's because I admire the hell out of what they do. And I want to learn what they're doing. And I want to compete with them. I want to have friendly competition with them. And man, when I changed to doing that, my career grew like so fast compared to before. And I just couldn't see, like I was getting in my own way, where I was like, my numbers speak for themselves. I'm the best. I'm the best here. I don't need to go network. Everyone already can see my numbers on the board. They'll come to me. And it's like, yeah, but that means that you're not approachable. You're not making an effort of being approachable. You never know who's going to work for you, and you never know who you're going to work for. You know, and I think that probably relates to wrestling, definitely relates to the battle rap side as well, where it's like, man, you never know who you're going to get paired with. You could be the biggest
Yeah,
asshole to somebody, and you could have good reason to be. You know, something goes wrong in a match, whatever. You hear something in the back, you know, whatever. But then it's all right. Y'all are a tag team now. Get this over. It's
yeah,
like, dude, we have zero chemistry. You know, like you got to preserve territory. You got to make sure that you do it. And I think that's, man, that's huge. That's awesome.
yeah. Especially wrestling is such a like free form, like crazy sport. You will I always try to go out of my way to be as nice and cool to people that like I'm just meeting, because legitimately you don't know, they might start up a promotion tomorrow and it might become like they could look like the biggest goof, and you're not really sure who they are or why they're there or whatever, and then oh, actually that person is like the hottest indie in the country now all of a sudden, and you were an asshole to him, and it's like, well,
Yep.
congratulations, brother, you buried yourself. Stuff like that happens all the time. Or some new kid who's barely starting out, and it's like you could either he probably had a shit match or whatever. You could either bury him and tell him, embarrass him in front of the locker room about how bad he was. You went over time and this sucked and you botched
Yep.
this, or you could take it as like a learning moment. You could help him out, and in a year when all of a sudden that skinny, young kid, all of a sudden he's put a little muscle on his frame and he's learning how to work because some other guy actually took the time to help him out, and now he's on AEW every week, and it's like, oh wow, he just surpassed me in this amount of time, and now he hates my guts because I was a jerk to him or whatever. Stuff like that in wrestling happens all the time. So unless like you absolutely have to, if it's like this is like now it's a personal thing, it's not just a work thing or something stupid or a miscommunication. It's always better to be nice, be at least like professional to people as you're meeting them.
Agreed, man. It is. If you don't, then you're really setting yourself up to eventually have failure, because you never know what role someone's going to be. You never know what somebody is going to become down the road. I can imagine there's probably some people when the Young Bucks were in New Japan that were like, "Man, these dudes are abrasive," and probably didn't want to mess with them whatsoever. And then, lo and behold, they're two of the biggest parts, literally at a VP level, to the second largest organization, in the country. And if you want a job in wrestling, it's a little different than sales. You can sell anywhere. There's only so many spots. It's like pro football. There's only so many spots, and that's it. There's only so many organizations. And who knew that this was going to come up out of nowhere? No one would have even predicted that, 6, 7 years ago. They thought that they couldn't even sell out, the United Center back when it was All In or something like that. They thought it'd be impossible. Now they're doing it all the time. Some of the biggest names, ever, have came through there. And it might not be them. They're just who I think of based on their persona of what you see on TV, that maybe they could come off a bit abrasive. I could think of one name who's done a pretty bad job of preserving territory, for sure. Man, is that ever an example? And I'm not, by the way, I'm not asking you a question about this. But man, I won't even say the name, but man, is that an example of, no matter how good you are, if you can't build the relationships with the people that you don't like, because, that example built some great relationships with people that they got along with. But you could see where if they didn't vibe with somebody, they and it's not about being fake, it's just being cordial. Like you were saying, you don't got to be fake, just be professional.
Be professional. That's just Yep.
And if you're not, man, that can certainly be troublesome, man. Dude, I was gonna couple things, and we'll close it out. So we did a pre-interview, and I asked what separates you from your peers. And the big thing that kind of hit with me, because what I always tell people, it sounds corny. It sounds like, if you ever watch Silicon Valley, Jack Barker, with the conjoined triangles of success. But I always say there's 3 keys to success. Been saying this for probably 13 years now. Maintain a positive attitude at all times. If you lose it, you got to check it and get it back. Have a work ethic. You got to have the best work ethic that's out there. And you have to have and maintain a student mentality. You have to always be a student to the game. You have to always be looking to learn, or else you're going to plateau. What you said was consistency, which I guess you could relate to work ethic, but the reality is, and I could even throw myself in this boat from time to time, I can have the best motor in terms of work ethic that's out there, but there's times where I don't have it. It's not always consistent. And that's the part that I think that across the board, above all else, that's what you actually do need to have. Because all of those things that I just named: maintain a positive attitude, be a student to the game always, have a great work ethic. You can't have it one day and not the next. If you're not stringing it together consistently, you're just never going to have, if you're not consistent with what you're doing, you're not going to have a consistent level of success. That's tough, man. Because, in sales, you get cursed out and get a gun pulled on you if you're going door to door. Certainly have. Get all sorts of shit, physical altercations. You don't get that as much when you're on the phone, for sure, but you can get some stuff. And you have to think about how to stay motivated and inspired for you to be able to be consistent and not lose that. So it's funny, in my business, the way that I always relate it. So in tech sales, you have people that are called sales development representatives. They cold call on the phone, they cold email, they book the meetings, and then the account executives close them. And in tech sales, it said, sales development representative, hardest job in the business, which, by the way, it is. But if you've gone door to door, dude, that sales development job ain't shit. It's a joke. It is a walk in the park. When I had to wear a suit and tie in August in Tampa, Florida, and have somebody push me out the door, pull a gun on me if I'm at the pawn shop, and then I got to walk to the next spot, that is a lot different than somebody hanging up on you and then you just call another one in air conditioning. And nowadays you're doing it in gym shorts without any shoes on at your crib. Like it's way different. So for
what was the reason that they pulled the gun on you? What was the story on that?
Dude, they don't want you in there. They don't like cold calls. It says no soliciting on the door. The big story with me, that's why a lot of door-to-door people have that one, where someone they might not point it at you, but they'll flash a gun. Particularly if you're knocking pawn shops. The one for me was I went out with I was in the field with this chick Sadia, who was like my a partner that we were working together, a colleague, right? And we were knocking doors, and we went to a funeral home. And this is, back when we were representing Verizon. Funny enough, I was doing door to door Verizon, and then company I worked for that actually mattered, Verizon bought, years down the road. And they're like, "Get out of here." I'm like, "All right, cool." We didn't even try to overcome the objection. I learned that when you're being invasive in door to door, I don't try to overcome objections. I just let my work ethic make up for it, and I'll move on to the next one because I don't want the hassle. I don't want the drama. It's going to affect my habit,
Sure.
right? So we left. We're walking like across a field in St. Petersburg, and the funeral home owner walked out to us and said, "Matter of fact, give me your badge," because you had to wear a badge. Because we actually didn't work for Verizon. We were an independent corporate licensee. We were allowed to sell Verizon. Like we were like a licensed vendor for Verizon.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
the badges were dog shit, dude. They barely said Verizon on it. And underneath it says like independent agent. And it was paper inside of like a plastic lanyard. It could not have looked more dog shit or fake. But it technically wasn't. We were working for Verizon. He was like, "Let me see your badge." Obviously doesn't walk up to me, by no stretch of my suplexing dudes, but I'm not a small guy,
Sure.
and Sadia was not large whatsoever. And he grabbed the lanyard and tried to yank it off of her neck. And it's attached to like the old lanyard, like a fabric lanyard.
Yeah.
It was going to break or anything like that. He like jostled the shit out of her. And I got in the dude's ass and screaming at him. Didn't put hands on him. I don't know why. I was only 100% commission. Probably should have in reality, but we dipped, right? We moved on to the next spot. We made some sales. 2 weeks later, one of my boys comes into the office. Probably 45 of us in the office. We'd always have to come to the office at the end of the day and settle up. He's got a St. Pete Times with him, and it's not the front page, but it's in one of there, and it says, funeral con job foiled by funeral home owner. And then it's vividly describing, but in a light that makes him look good, exactly what happened. The exact same. I'm like, dude, that was me. That was when we were out in the field, and dude, like basically like try to rip Sadia's head off, and grab her by the lanyard and everything like that. That was my tough one, man. For sure. That was
that's whack. Yeah.
That was my interesting tale when it came to being in the field. And there's a million of them. I'm probably going to have some door to door guys on here and reminisce and not do it live because I'll have to edit quite a bit of it, I'm sure. But dude, like I think of that where it's like perspective. So you have SDRs that say it's the toughest job. Other people agree. I agree in tech sales, but it's actually not a tough job, and with you, the reality is that's a pretty tough job. You can get injured and be on the shelf. Success hurts. You can't not be in pain all the time, and have success. You're going to be hurt quite a bit. So to bring it back to what I was saying about consistency, what keeps you consistent? What is it like? What motivates you? If you were to sit down and think what actually really gets you up and going consistently more than anything else, what would you say that is?
Wow, that's actually a really good question. I think I've always been about my actions. Not that words aren't important, but wrestling is a business that's full of passion, and everyone always wants to talk about how passionate they are and how much they've sacrificed. But a lot of those people, when it comes to they're passionate about wrestling matches, but they're not passionate about reaching out to places that may or may not hit you back up to get new bookings. They're not passionate about hitting the gym every day so that you look like a wrestler. They're not passionate about practicing your promos because they suck right now and you need to be able to get better at them. And I think it's I don't know, over any of my fears, because I do have plenty of fears. I do have plenty of weak points in my game, or I have had in the past and whatnot, is I just refuse to accept the idea that I could fail at this. I know that if I don't do all the things that I need to do in order to make it, it won't happen. This is all on me. I'm a wrestler. I am my own boss at the end of the day. I'm an independent contractor. There's no one that's going to be like, hey, you should hit the gym. Hey, you should do this. For the most part, you're lucky if you have friends that really, will do that for you. At least they're not going to do it consistently. So I think I just really trust the process. I know, I believe in what I'm what I'm doing, I believe that, okay, if I do practice my promos, if I do hit the gym consistently, if I do reach out to promoters, if I do continue to foster interpersonal relationships, all this, like I just know that that's what's going to work. So I just have to be consistent at it, because I think like the first part of any, like, oh, did you do a good job? Did you get the job? Did you win the championship? Did you whatever is, were you there? Like if you weren't there, you can't do anything. Like you can't win the Super Bowl if you are not at the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things, like you've got to be consistent. So it's just like, it's a process, and I trust the process. So I do my best at it consistently all the time, because I do have, trust me, every morning, including this morning, I wake up, I'm sore all over, I'm tired. I don't want to immediately go in and start pounding weights or whatever. I don't want to, it's like, I I have plenty of things I could deal with. I don't want to go practice promos. I don't want to do film study on other wrestlers and all this stuff. But it's like, this is the life that I want, and I have to be consistent at it. If this is what if I'm really that passionate and I'm really making sacrifices, this is what I'm doing.
I like the trust word, man. I like that, because you have to trust that the results will come if you do what you know is necessary to create the results. And I think that is a part of it, when people start to lose a little bit of faith in, not even in themselves, but in what outcome will happen if you do all of the right things that you know that you should do. Then you're kind of toast, for sure. Man, couldn't agree more. So one last thing, man. So I think when you set out to do this, I would have to assume, based on everything you've said, like Japan was huge for you. As big as it gets in Japan is where you're at right now. You're at the mountaintop in terms of the organization. If you were to look at your career and you were to say the long-term goal, the end all be all, if everything works out, if you trust the process and you do everything, what does that look like? What's the tangible goal for you? That's the big one, where you'd say, all right, I did it. What's the largest one that you're reaching for?
The IWGP Heavyweight Championship. That's New Japan's highest championship, and that's been the goal. That's what I want. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, that's awesome, man. And honestly, man, I have no doubt that you have the ability to do it, man. I remember talking to you, Jesus, I think the first time we talked about wrestling was probably 2015. You're probably like a year in,
Yeah, I was green as shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And dude, that, like, here we are 9 years later, man. And, dude, you're more than halfway there. You're in the building, dude, and now it's just a matter of what you do with it, man. You're aligned with the right people. Attitude is there. It's awesome, man. It's, dude, it's awesome to track your career. Been awesome to see kind of like where you've gone from, where you came from, where you're going. It's dope, man. I appreciate you being on here. And, next time you're in Florida, please let me know, because words can't express how cool it makes me look when I tell my son, hey, we're gonna go watch the boy and pull up. So and we'll definitely pull up and show support.
I thank you so much for having me on. It was a great time. I love doing podcasts like this, where it's like, it's about wrestling, but it's kind of not about wrestling. So this has been a fun experience. And yeah, man, I'm gonna let you know next time I'm in Florida. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I talk to the people with nothing to lose, smoking up in the rooms, hopeless, broken, and caught in the evil. I can't make it rain, but I can make a soul to make your eyes April shower. Day by day, I'm taking off. So say goodbye and changing now. Afraid I may